The wind tore at the shutters, rattling them like loose teeth. Sand hissed against the boards, piling in the corners of the porch. Through the rip in the horizon, a dark figure leaned into the gale, one hand on the brim of a battered hat, the other clutching his coat closed. He stopped at the fence gate. Didn't open it, just stood there, watching. Clara's palm tightened around the shotgun. The storm blurred the edges of his shape, but she could see the slump in his shoulders, the way his boots dragged as he stepped forward. The porch groaned under his weight. He reached the doorframe and leaned against it like a man who'd come the last mile on willpower alone. "I'm dirty, poor, and barely standing," he said, voice rough as gravel. The wind snatched the words, but she heard enough. "So was I once," Clara replied, lowering the barrel but not the steel in her eyes. "Come inside." He hesitated. His gaze flicked past her, into the dim interior, as if measuring something unseen. Then he stepped in. The door shut against the storm with a hollow thud. The smell of wet leather and trail dust filled the room. He left muddy water in his footprints across the plank floor. His coat dripped at the hem, each drop pattering like a clock counting down. "You're alone," he said, his tone flat, not a question. Clara set the shotgun back on its hooks. "Storm's bad. Best you find a seat before it gets worse." The stranger's eyes moved slow over the room. The rough-hewn table, the cold stove, the single chair with a blanket draped across it. They lingered on the framed photograph on the mantel, where dust had gathered in a half-moon along the glass. He didn't ask about it. The wind pressed hard against the walls, making the rafters creak. Somewhere outside, a loose hinge clanged in the gusts. "Coffee?" Clara asked. He nodded once. His hands were cracked and raw, knuckles scabbed over like old battles. As he sat, the chair let out a groan as if it knew the weight it now held. While the kettle hissed on the stove, she caught him glancing at the window, not at the storm but beyond it, like he expected something to be moving out there. "You headed through?" she asked. "Was." He rolled the brim of his hat between his fingers. "Might stay a spell. Weather's got a mean streak." The kettle whistled. She poured the coffee, the steam curling between them like smoke from a campfire. When he took the cup, his fingers brushed hers. They were cold as creek water in winter. The silence stretched. Outside, the wind shifted, bringing with it a different sound, faint, distant, and low. Hooves. Clara's head tilted slightly. He didn't look up from the coffee, but she saw his jaw tighten. "You expecting someone?" she asked. "No," he said. The word dropped heavy, final. The hoofbeats faded, or maybe the wind swallowed them. He drank slow, eyes closing for a heartbeat as if the warmth was dragging him back from somewhere far away. When he set the cup down, the handle was turned toward her. A habit, she realized, the kind of thing someone did when they'd shared fires with strangers and learned to mind their manners. "You could take the cot in the corner," she said. "Storm's not letting up before nightfall." His eyes flicked toward it, then to the door. "I'll stay by the fire," he said. "Don't like sleeping too far from an exit." She almost asked why. Almost. Instead, she took up her sewing, the steady pull of the needle the only sound between them. Every so often, the wind shifted, and she caught a flicker of movement beyond the window, a shadow where there should have been none. The stranger's hand went to his coat pocket. Not quick, not threatening, just there, resting. Night thickened around the house. The lamplight painted his face in gold and shadow, carving deep lines into his cheeks. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer. "This land's not kind of folk who don't belong." His gaze met hers across the table. For the first time, she saw the edge beneath the weariness, sharp, deliberate, dangerous. "Neither am I," he said. The wind howled, rattling the panes, and somewhere out in the black, a single rider paused on the canyon ridge, watching the little ranch house below. The moon rode high, pale as bone, casting long shadows across the yard. Coyotes called from the far ridges, their yips and cries threading through the stillness. The stranger stood by the fence, backlit in silver, his coat shifting in the light breeze. One hand rested on the post, the other hung loose but never far from the bulge beneath his coat. Claire stepped out with a lantern. The light pushed the dark back just enough to see the hard line of his jaw. "Something moving out there?" she asked. Not moving, he said. Waiting. The lantern flame danced in the wind. Out beyond the wire fence, the desert stretched flat and empty, or nearly empty. Two faint depressions in the dirt, side by side, led toward the horizon. Hoofprints. Fresh. She crouched, fingers brushing the edges. Not from town, she said. Too deep. Whoever's riding's been pushing their horse hard. He didn't answer. His eyes stayed fixed on the canyon ridge, where the moonlight caught on something that shouldn't have been there, a brief glint like steel. Then it was gone. They went back inside without speaking. The stranger took the chair by the window. Claire set the lantern low on the table. Shadows clung to the corners, thick and restless. He kept watching the glass. They'll wait for daylight. Storm or no storm, they want to see what they're walking into. Her sewing lay in her lap, forgotten. You know them? I know the type. A loose shutter banged against the wall outside. The sound was sharp in the silence. He rose, crossed the room, and dropped the latch into place. Then he leaned his forehead against the frame, listening. Through the thin walls, the wind carried more than coyote song. There, a faint creak like leather under strain. Then quiet. At dawn, the storm had blown itself east. The sky was washed clean, the desert stretching out in every direction under the pale gold light. Clara stepped outside, boots sinking into the damp earth. The stranger was already at the corral, mending a broken rail. His movements were precise, quick, and sure, the kind of skill that came from years of practice, not just farm work. You work like a soldier, she said without thinking. He didn't look up. Soldiers work in lines. I work alone. From the corner of her eye, she caught it, a set of fresh tracks leading toward the barn. Not from a horse this time. Boots. The heel print showed a worn-down edge, uneven. Whoever was had been close enough to touch the barn door. She called out to him, voice low. He came, crouched beside her, and studied the prints. His gaze lifted to the horizon. 3 riders were just visible in the distance, their shapes rippling in the morning heat. One carried a long rifle across his saddle. They've been watching since last night, Claire said. The stranger's jaw tightened. They'll keep watching until they've decided what to do. Or until I do. The sun climbed higher, burning the shadows short. Clara watered the horses, every sense alert to the quiet. Too quiet. Even the coyotes were gone. When she came back to the porch, he was sitting with his coat off, cleaning a revolver. The metal gleamed in the light, well-oiled and deadly. His hands moved with the ease of a man long acquainted with such work. You carry it like you've had to use it more than once, she said. Once was enough, he replied. But there was no conviction in it. The day stretched on. The riders didn't come closer, but they didn't leave either. Just specks on the horizon, patient as buzzards. By nightfall, the air felt heavier. The stars were sharp above, the moon thin and watchful. From her window, Clara saw the stranger still on the porch, hat brim low, watching the dark. Whatever was coming, it hadn't come yet, but it was close enough to hear the desert breathe. The town's main street shimmered in the heat, boards creaking under the slow sway of the saloon doors. Horses stood tied along the rail, tails twitching against the flies. Clara kept her hat low as she stepped off the wagon. The stranger moved ahead, scanning every window, every shadow. Boots scraped on the boardwalk. 2 men leaned on a post outside the mercantile, their eyes following the stranger with the weight of recognition. Neither smiled. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the faint scent of molasses. Clara filled her basket with flour, salt, and coffee. When she looked up, he was by the far wall, jaw tight, staring past her at the saloon across the street. Through the open door, the Grayson brothers sat at a corner table, their chairs tipped back, cards in hand. Their laughter carried over the piano's off-key notes. One of them, broad-shouldered, with a scar across his cheek, caught sight of her. His smile was thin as a knife blade. "Well, if it ain't the widow Reeves," he called, voice dripping with mockery. "Running the ranch all by your lonesome?" The stranger stepped between them before she could answer. He didn't raise his voice, didn't touch his gun, just stood there. The room's noise thinned around them. The scarred Grayson's eyes narrowed. "You got business here, friend?" The stranger's gaze didn't waver. "Not with you. Unless you want it." The Graysons laughed, but it was hollow. Cards hit the table harder than they needed to. Clara left without another word, the stranger falling into step beside her. The street seemed quieter now, though more eyes watched from behind curtains and doorframes. An old prospector shuffled past, his beard tangled in gray. He glanced at the stranger, then spat into the dust. "Ain't seen the sand ghost in years," he muttered, half to himself. Thought he was dead. The stranger didn't look back. By the time they reached the wagon, the sun was sliding west. Shadows stretched long across the street, and the sound of spurred boots followed them. Not close enough to touch, but close enough to mean something. They rode out of town with the weight of silence pressing in. The desert air was cooling, but the tension sat heavy, like the air before lightning strikes. Near the halfway mark, Clara spotted them, a cluster of riders on the high ridge, outlined against the fading sky. The Graysons' horses, she'd bet her life. "They're not going away," she said. "No," he answered. "They're waiting for the right place." The road narrowed ahead, twisting between red rock walls. Back at the ranch, the stranger set the supplies down without a word, then sat at the table, laying his revolver in front of him. The barrel caught the lamplight in a hard, clean line. Clara stood by the door. "You could leave before they come." His hands were steady as he worked the cylinder, checking each chamber. "They've been looking for me. Guess it's time I stopped running." Outside, the night gathered thick and silent. Somewhere far off, a horse snorted, then another. The reckoning was close enough to taste. The sun bled across the mesa, staining the red rock deeper still. Dust drifted in slow spirals where the trail narrowed between jagged walls. Clara sat straight in the saddle, rifle across her lap. The stranger rode ahead, hat brim low, eyes never leaving the bend where the canyon opened. Hoofbeats rolled toward them, slow at first, then steady. From the mouth of the pass, the Graysons emerged, 6 riders fanning out behind them. Steel glinted in the light. Scar-faced Grayson smiled like he'd already won. Into the trail, Widow. Clara's fingers tightened on the rifle stock. The stranger slid off his horse, boots landing soft in the dust. "No," he said, "just the beginning." The first shot cracked the stillness. The stranger moved faster than her eyes could follow. His revolver cleared leather, fired twice, and 2 riders fell before the echo faded. Gunfire thundered back, bullets hissing against stone. Clara swung down, taking cover behind a boulder. The air filled with grit and the sharp sting of powder. Another man fell to the stranger's aim. His draw was pure instinct, each shot placed as if time bent for him alone. But they were circling. Scar-faced Grayson shouted orders, his rifle lifting toward the stranger's back. Clara rose from cover, the rifle firm against her shoulder. One breath steady. The trigger broke clean. The shot hit him square, knocking him from the saddle. The rest faltered, hesitation breaking their charge. The stranger used it. One final sweep of his revolver dropped the last of them. Silence closed in, broken only by the dry rasp of wind through the rocks. The stranger stood, chest heaving, a red stain spreading at his side. Clara stepped toward him, rifle still warm in her hands. "You're the sand ghost," she said. His eyes met hers. "Not today. Today, that was you." He tipped his hat, blood darkening the brim, and turned toward the open desert. Clara watched until the dust swallowed him whole. By nightfall, word would spread. The Graysons were gone. The widow had stood at Crimson Mesa, shoulder to shoulder with the ghost, and won. Some would tell it different, years from now, that she was the ghost all along. And when the wind howled through the canyon, folks swore you could still hear the single shot that ended it.